Hey guys, it's Doa. You may think to yourself, hey, Doa's too nice to be on Thorin's channel. Why is he there? And you're right. He's locked me in his closet, and I'm being forced to record this. Help?
So, okay, well, this is going to be a question I've got to set up a little bit of context for here, because at the time that I joined OnGamers, so it was actually in the latter part of 2013, we basically made the deal at Season 3 Worlds at the Staples Centre. Right, when you were bringing me on, the reason I had to set this up is because otherwise there's context, everyone's going to be like, yeah, so what? Right? At the time, people won't know, I'd never had a scandal in esports. First of all, the idea there was scandals around people who were journalists in esports, like, already, you have to understand it was a very different world. Like, I was the guy, I was the fucking byline, I wasn't the story. Like, you know, no one ever interviewed me back there. Like, I was the fucking people doing the interviewing. So even if I was, like, one of the most famous esports journalists, you know, that meant I had, like, 4,000 Twitter followers or something, and, you know, 3,800 of them were all people in the industry just being mildly petty to me, you know, like, there was no fans, and definitely we weren't the stars, the players were the stars. So one thing that I actually, and another thing for people who don't know, I famously didn't appear on camera. I'd been on camera for like a few IEMs where I'd been the color commentator, and even then, by the way, I was like the dry nerd commentator. I was the guy who was like, well, I think on this round they're going to do tactics, and actually I think they, you know, they should have bought differently there. And actually, famously, people used to go, he's making some good points, but it's not even, no charisma there, no personality, you know. And I've always told this story. There's a certain very famous person, you could probably guess who, but don't, because I've never said the name. There's a very famous broadcast figure from the UK in esports who once just basically took me to one side in this era and told me, like, look, I know ESL, etc. hiring you, but if I were you, mate, I'd knock it on the head. You'll never make it on camera. Like, it's just not in your DNA, you know. In fact, you told me, by the way, at the time, what seemed like appropriate advice, that, you know, you'd be better off camera. Like, why don't you write the stats, or why don't you come up with a storyline or whatever? And I was like, yeah, you've got a point there, you know. Now, at the time you hired me, I hadn't obviously done the on-camera interviews. I'd made myself a persona like I am now. So then when you told me this comment when I was having the negotiation with you to join, it was a very weird comment. I actually didn't know what the fuck you meant, but it was mad prescient, actually. What you said to me was, you said as we were like basically agreeing to work together, you were like, you're going to be the hardest employee I ever hire. And I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, I'm one of the best, you know, I'm the guy who just gets my head down, I do my work, I'm super prolific. And I remember thinking at the time, what on earth does that mean? What, did you have any idea what you meant by that? Because obviously, like, listen, I think within something about 4 months, I'd already had that poll and shit. So you tapped into something.
Oh, I knew. So I knew that you were somewhere on the autistic spectrum, which, when you've managed people for a while, you start to see like different archetypes in people. Not
sure.
You shouldn't fucking be a manager, you know? And what I saw in you was like, I've read your content for a long time, I've seen your videos, I've heard your questions. You are a person with a very strong sense of right and wrong that's based in logic and reason. Most people probably don't attribute those types of values or thinking to you, but I do. I think you're bad at seeing the great talent, nuances in life, but you're exceptionally clear-viewed when it comes to like the other sides of the spectrum. And it's symptomatic for many other people I know who are roughly the same place.
Sure. And
so when you have someone like that, then the things that we experience is just bound to happen. You know, I have it to a lesser degree, but I'm with you all the way. Like, I have some words that I will fight for, and like, I refuse to censor myself and not say this word right now because it's the technically correct and best describing word for the situation. So fuck you and your political correctness. And I saw someone who, when he would get triggered, would take a fight. I think you're a person who's willing to stand up for the little man or for injustice or unfairness when you see it and it touches you enough personally that, or that you feel like you can make a difference when you do it. You're a knight without the armor in a world that doesn't necessarily love or need knights. So I pretty much knew what I was saying, and I at the same time completely underestimated what would happen. I thought it would be to a much lesser degree, but I thought that I would be the guy fighting for a team of weird oddballs in a company that didn't really have any place or mentality for weird oddballs.
Right. This might sound really weird from the outside, because actually, as I alluded to before, it was already, bear in mind this is an American company. already it was the world where, the HR person, like as soon as there's any minor thing, you just get rid of the person, you get someone else in, they haven't had the problem solved, hopefully people are replaceable. It's the American way of thinking about companies, right? When some of the things happened in my career, like the whole Poland shit, or later on, you've said a mean joke about a player or whatever. One thing that might shock fans is we've never, ever, ever actually had a discussion about any of those situations, right? Because you're a pretty matter-of-fact guy. Like in that scenario, also you aren't the guy who decides basically if they get fired or not. It's probably someone above your pay station. So what's funny is, if I tell people, when the Poland thing happened, I remember I called you and we were just talking. I was saying stuff like, oh, so it's going to, and you were like, listen, it's already happened. Here's what you're going to do. Like, you're going to not say something for 2 days or something, we're going to like handle that. Then you're going to come back. Like, here's how the job will keep going. You'll keep doing your job. If I don't hear anything, we'll forget about it. And then similarly, at the end, you just basically called me one day and you're like, look, I've got someone else on the line here. I have to have like a lawyer present to do this. Like, basically, we're going to have to let you go. It's going to be like this. Here's the terms. Like, here's like a severance package or whatever. Again, there was never any discussion because it wasn't like I wasn't on like a short trial. It wasn't like about your personal morals or whatever. Like, it was in that scenario. Did someone high enough up the food chain, potentially way above us, like obviously CBSi connects and like massive companies at the top. Essentially, the question is that do those people say you have to remove the person? If they don't, maybe you have to purview to keep the person. So, how did you deal with some of those incidents? Because obviously, we had not just with me, we had other scandals with other people at the site in some of the incidents. How were you able to manage those things? It doesn't seem like you tried to make it actually like a personal or moral quandary,
Oh, like. So to take the latter part of the question first, like, who the fuck am I to judge people for a moral perspective, which I do is thinks that I'm a dumb party boy. Many people do too. I don't engage in political discussions almost on principle, because who cares what my opinion about these things are? There are people who think about these things all the time, and you should probably listen to them. What I look at in a person is that, do I believe that he intentionally did something stupid to accomplish something of personal gain? I never felt like you did that. Is the person still the same person I hired in terms of the quality of output of work? I just believe that you got better and better for every day that you were employed. And can I understand what happened in the situation? I know exactly what happened. When you did the dumb Poland comment, you had been working your ass off for, as far as I remember, 36 hours. And now I have this medical condition, so I can tell you that I know exactly what happens to my brain when I have pushed myself as hard as I can, and I go into situations like a social call or what would have back then been a webcam podcast or whatever, yes. Right? Like, you could have failed much harder, and I don't think you failed. I think you just made a dumb joke that some people who were kind of looking for an excuse to get angry about something got very angry about, including people in Poland who are, in my experience, often looking for an excuse to feel angry about things. It's the unhappiest people that I have ever... I lived in Poland for a year. Like, the lack of sun for thousands of years has just made them clinically depressed as a country. That's not racist. The Polish people are not a race. They are a place in geography. I thought it was a sign of things to come and what the world would become. And I guess pioneering esports was again sort of like on the front of cultural technology and how those two merge. It was bullshit. I had other cases later. I had one of my employees. I also ran a team on GameSpot, and I had one of the employees for all GameSpot competitions. That the winners seemed to be weirdly placed in the same city where he lived.
Right. Okay.
So what happens in those situations is that your boss, so in my case I was a general manager, comes and says like, look, we have a situation, or we found this problem. What do you want to do? This is your chance to also get rid of the person if you don't like the person. But I believe that what my personal feelings are for a person really shouldn't affect my working relationship with if I'm good enough as a person to like not let it. So I actually never took action on any of those things. I don't like firing people. I hate it. You're taking someone's livelihood away, and if you can make it work, I think you owe it to everyone involved in the situation to try to make it work. I'm not always good at making it work, but I try.
Right, obviously, one of the incidents we have to mention is the Reddit incident, because here's the thing that I will correct. I mean, we corrected it in that interview we did a few years back as well, but technically it was not getting banned on Reddit that, like, killed OnGamers. Basically, the sad reality of it all, which we actually all knew about 5 months in, is, like, OnGamers actually was, again, an idea ahead of its time, and at the time, the monetizations didn't exist. Like, I'll give you an example. Back then, I could get you literally as many hits as you want, because I'll just keep making more articles and we get the hits, right? The problem was it wasn't about the number of hits. It was about the hits are just to get the eyeballs, and then it's about the marketing team has to sell the bloody ads and all this. And that was where, guess what? Even if they were, I'm sure these were amazing people at GameSpot and CBSi, the problem was they didn't know esports. So I'm sure they could have sold, like a bunch of reviews for some fucking video game, but they didn't know the esports space. So even though we were getting actually fucking sick numbers, it didn't translate to anything. So to a fan, again, they were like, they thought it was about if we got the hits directly or did our numbers go down. Like that never would have affected it. And basically, I mean, it never really could have actually succeeded, right? It would have always petted out after. Maybe it could have gone a bit longer. Could it have gone like 2 years or something? But eventually, surely they would have like pulled the plug anyway, right?
The market was ready 1 year after we closed down, which is, again, I say, like, I'm usually too early.
Is that your trend, is it?
Yeah, it really is. So if we stayed in the game, we would have gotten there. It's actually the one miscalculation that I'm most, what's the word I'm looking for? Like annoyed or frustrated over that I made. I really thought the CBS thing through, and I thought this has a, maybe a 25% chance of succeeding and a 75% chance of not succeeding. Here are all the factors that count against it, and I could list them up. And what I put on this is why it could work list is that I think 6 months or so before I took the job, there was a strategist who was fucking smart. And he didn't fit in with CBS whatsoever. They didn't know what to do with him, so they wanted to make him executive, but they didn't want to give him like something to do because he was not that type of executive who should be running things. So they put him on chief strategy officer or something. And he saw esports and was like, "Oh, this thing is gonna fucking blow up." And he's saying this prediction in 2011 or something. So he was relatively early, right? And he went out and he bought the entire video inventory for Twitch, Major League Gaming, ESL, I think, I'm not sure. I think maybe something other. Basically, I remember reading the press release when I wasn't working there and thinking, wow, someone just shored up all the inventory in esports. And that was the CBS sales team that sold that. So the same people who sold OnGamers as a commercial advertising product sold all the video inventory in esports for about a year. 6 to 12 months or so. Then, of course, Twitch was like, okay, why are we giving 50% of our revenue to this company when we can just do it ourselves? ESL started thinking the same thing because as a few years had passed, it became very easy to all of a sudden sell your own product in an advertising thing online, right? So you didn't really need a company like that. So when I started OnGamers, I did it under the assumption that I had a sales team working for the company that knew, maybe one of the only sales teams in the world that knew how to sell esports. It turns out they had just sold video. They hadn't sold esports. They had just sold it as video, and anything that they could sell, they would run. So when I came with the esports product, they just looked at me like I was nuts. I can actually tell you that I was, for the first 5 months or so that I worked there, like I was looked at as a lesser person or as a person of lesser value to the company, to the point where people were like, "Why did we hire this idiot? Esports, this is stupid. Nothing will ever happen with it." And then Riot Games sold out League of Legends, Staples Center World Finals. Headlines changed all over the world, and boom. The day after, people started coming to me for the esports stuff, and all of a sudden we were seen as an entity within the games family that had like five different gaming websites, GameSpot being one of them, right? And when we broke the story for League of Legends player contracts, we had more traffic than GameSpot. That changed the perspective even more internally.
Right, one thing, because obviously, as you're describing, like GameSpot was first, it was a general game site, reviews, articles, etc. And then this was like, I mean, the term only just been invented, like the esports vertical, which was like, again, the fucking buzzword, all the middle managing people spamming everywhere. I still hear it now and it makes me fucking cringe, but whatever. That was the concept, right? This is going to be the spin off site or whatever. Now, obviously, that has not really actually been a thing, except for these rare instances, like obviously ESPN did one and Yahoo did one. They all shut down after a while. But one thing I want to ask you about is you would think as a result that in the long run, as long as you're making the hits, and this is a business about hits at that point in time, because that's what allows you then to sell the marketing, etc. And when you do that, you would think that the games site would understand, like, this is a sister publication. Like, these are also journalists. They're just in a competitive sense in a game instead of being about the industry, right? And even though I'll say, I know the bigger picture of this, because just journalistically, I don't just look at the surface thing. I find out who started this thing, who is he, who funded him, what the fuck's he doing, like what did he write about in a white paper 10 years before he started. I try to go like deep on it, to find out why. So I know a lot of these people cynically don't represent what they actually like. They don't believe in any of the political causes. That's just a fucking stick to beat you with, or it's just their angle. To them, that's like wearing a fucking Misfits t-shirt now. And then I go, "What's your favorite Misfits song?" And they go, "Don't really listen to it. It's a cool t-shirt." And it's like that's what politics is now, right? But I thought maybe since you've worked literally in offices with these people, and obviously you went to GameSpot, so you were with the sorts of game journalists who, funnily enough, a couple of years after that, basically became the kinds of people that now would be like, well, I always say this, they're not my enemy, but they consider themselves my enemy, if you get what I mean. Like, they decide that I'm like the evil in the world that must be, wiped out, and they're the one who, they're the fucking punisher. They're here to make sure that it's done. Why do you think there is this like natural hostility from the general games journalists to the esports people? Because I always assumed, by the way, it would be the other way around. We'd start these esports verticals and someone would just eventually figure out, why the fuck are we having that guy if he's getting like millions of hits? Why doesn't he just write for our main site and just, that's basically, we would become sort of the journalists in the whole gaming space. But as you can see, we've sort of been siloed. We're not allowed out of that. And in fact, it's very convenient, isn't it? All the great esports journalists, politically we're verboten. We can never be on these big game sites. You have to be in this little cliques, or you might have a different perspective to me because you were literally sort of embedded with these guys. What's their mentality? How are they thinking?
Shocked, actually. Like, when I started my Danish game site back in 1998, I think, 99, I opened GameSpot and copied the best feature for my own design because they were a world leader in how to do a gaming review website. No one knew how to do that. They were the first ones to figure it out, I think. So I was really looking forward to actually becoming a vice president in the organization and meeting these people. And I was shocked. Like when I see someone in America say that systemic racism doesn't exist, I disagree with them, because I imagine that black people go through what I felt like as an esports person there. It wasn't a lack of respect, it was just minus respect, almost like a categorical refusal to also have any interest in it, because it was just esports.
Right.
And I don't know, when I started Xplayn in 2001, I was obviously part of the games industry. I had 40 writers writing for UB Games. And I remember they got several questions. Why are you starting a website for one game? So I don't know, if I subtract that and extrapolate it a lot, maybe it's because that these people don't really know what it's like to be part of a community that actually plays the same game. Maybe they have to jump between games so much that they haven't figured out that gaming has changed. It's not about buying a boxed copy of a game and put it on the shelf. Now, if a game is good, you become part of the community and the identity of the people who play it. If it's really good, you go to Reddit or somewhere else and become a forum member or whatever. And I don't think they understand it. I think, or maybe it's because over time, most of the audience don't care about them. They are just irrelevant to them. That's also why gaming journalists have become so warped. Back when I started one of the first gaming websites in Denmark, we had to invent gaming journalism. What does that look like online? If you can write, if you write a review for a written magazine, which was the only way you could get reviews up until the internet, right? There's a word count, because it has to go into print, it has to fit on the page.
Sure.
So you have to articulate your opinion within that frame. When you do an instant review, you don't have that limitation. So what does a review really look like? How long should it be? And so on. I experimented a lot with these things. I think journalists today are not experimenting with their craft. They are instead experimenting with virtue signaling and how they can make it a part of like some moral compass that goes into like the review.
Yes, they kind of crowbar their own thoughts in, right, about just some other shit.
Yes, yes. And that's because I think most of those people have never been the first person in the world to review a thing. You said you cracked your Commodore 64 or Amiga games or whatever. I was a senior member of Fairlight, Racer, 1911, Paradigm, Class. I can keep mentioning pirate group as it was a large part of my identity for many years to be an underground pirate. And that's really smart thing to do when you're running a gaming website, because it means that you have games before anyone else around you. Sure. That's a competition, and you can review them first. And I must say that back then I had a lot of like world records first reviews of a game, and that was okay to do in Denmark because that usually doesn't translate very well in the rest of the world. But I did notice that when I had done that, there were a obvious trend in certain reviews that people started focusing on the same things or gave the same angles. And, you know, there's a saying that everything is a remix, and I believe that. I think most people are afraid of invention because they don't know how to grasp it or how to make creativity into creation. That link is missing. I'm relatively good at that, and I enjoy doing it. But most people, I think, wouldn't be able to do that and feel comfortable doing it.
Another thing I wanted to ask about in this sense is, like, as far as I know, I'm guessing you were literally in San Francisco, right? That's where the headquarters of GameSpot is, right? Which, if people don't know, is obviously, like, it's actually where a lot of the tech stuff back then, Twitch, etc., all these companies basically were. Like, yeah, I know the Silicon Valley and all that garbage, but this was basically the area where, I mean, now it's well known, but back then it was sort of becoming like the little burgeoning hub everyone was moving to, right? Obviously now, like, literally, I could take, like, everyday headlines from what goes on in San Francisco now, and they would be an Onion headline 15 years ago. Like, you'd think there was just some dystopia, like the fucking nightmare. And if people don't know, if you want to go to like the heart of like you do like some woke dystopia, it just is San Francisco basically. So was it like that back when you lived there? It doesn't feel like you would fit in there, mate.
I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in at all. I took the CBS job and moved to San Francisco for two reasons. One, I couldn't come up with someone in my own head that I thought wouldn't fuck this CBS thing up. I think by natural law and the environment at the time, that it had this 25% chance of succeeding. If I did my very best, I gave it 20% chance in the hands of everyone else. I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm just like, all the things I had done in my career about building things and trying out new things just seemed to all correlate into this project that was starting. And I thought there was be a massive disservice to esports as a thing if it failed. The second reason why I wanted to be there was because I was really trying to start another company, and I wanted to move there to start getting to know people who knew about investing or who invested themselves. And there's a whole culture and a scene around that I had no insight into and no access to. And I thought that the best way I can do that is to go to be on the ground and meet the people. And that was the only part of those two reasons that made sense later on, I would say. But yeah, I'm happy I'm not living there anymore. I hated living there. I guess you know, my son was born in San Francisco. And when they start like moving around and so on, you have to take them out of the house and go to playgrounds. I say that as a chore, but I loved it. Except that if you do that in San Francisco, there'll be like 5 kids on the playground. And no one is talking to each other because there will all be like 5 groups or 5 individual parents that are from 5 different countries on Earth. And they all know that they're not going to be in San Francisco a year or 2 from now. So they don't even care about like meeting other people. They're just they're living in their own bubble. And I'm an introvert on my own, so that didn't bother me too much. But like, I don't think it's necessarily good for like, kids should see adults speak together and that. You know, there's a whole list of reasons why I felt like it was unhealthy and isolating. So yeah, like people who live in San Francisco usually have jobs that the real San Franciscoans hate them for having because they're driving them out of the market. And that you could feel that already back then. There was this local culture versus specifically tech culture. So like, you're like you met hostility everywhere. Like I lived in Chicago and everyone was smiling to you and hey, have a nice day. San Francisco is like, not a pleasant experience.
Right. We'll talk about the dreaded Reddit topic. So when the site basically got banned the first time, listen, the second time actually was Slasher's fault. Like, he just has to own that. He did that. No one made him do it. He took it on himself to do it. But the first time around, right, even the way it was actually messaged was very bizarre because obviously, like, the Reddit administrator people who are at the top of Reddit, basically, like, they didn't know the nuances. Hey, can you not hear me? Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. Right, but these people, right, they didn't know esports. Like, in fact, famously, I remember hearing from some of them through other people that when they even just saw the numbers we were getting from their own website, they were like, well, there obviously must be cheating. In fact, everything they do must be cheating because it's impossible to get these numbers. Because again, what people did not know back then was, in terms of like actual like internet publishing stuff, esports was we were the rock stars. Like, a big name can get like an enormous amount on a fucking interview. Like, people still don't take this into account. If someone could get 150,000 views on a fucking esports player interview, mate, you can put on some like real content that, unless it's on like, you know, a channel with millions of subs, like there's real sports stars might do something that might be at that level. You know, they might do some shitty podcast that might get 20,000 views. Like, the numbers were nuts, but they weren't wrong. There was some cheating in this particular case going on. So what would you say about that? Because it's been intimated that you were one of the people involved in it. It was like something going on in the office was doing it. Like, basically, why do you think we got banned for Reddit manipulation? What would your story be?
Well, first of all, there was no cheating going on. We in the beginning of the website, when I think this is way before you came on, we had a Facebook group. No, sorry. What's it called? The program?
Skype.
We had a Skype group with 5 people in it, I believe, that were all, you know, similar affiliated with the website. And then whenever we posted a new thing, we would go and upvote that. And then Slasher found out, and to Slasher's credit, he's like, "Are you fucking insane?" And he really raised his voice and made me understand that is stupid. So okay, shit, we'll never do that again, and we closed it down. Now, this was like, what, 6 months before the first ban happens, I think. When the ban happened, I don't have an explanation for it. My very, very best explanation would be that we were so good at using the system that we made the system do something that maybe it wasn't designed to do, and that the people who were making the system designed to output traffic that the inventors had never imagined. At the time, I don't know who it is now, was Nandecast. I think that was the name. Who they also owned Wired and a couple of other like publications, so they knew about advertising revenue and all those things. And it was going to the biggest competitor that they had in the market, which was CBS Interactive, which overall in traffic size was the 9th biggest company internet company in America. So I think it was less about cheating and more about, oh wait, what's going on here? Something must be off, and it must be manipulation. According to Reddit's definition of manipulation, if I remember it correctly, vote manipulation includes, and this is baffling to me, includes the notion of publishing your own content.
Yes. Essentially what you described there, having that Skype group, to them that is like ironclad, that smoking gun. By the way, are you implying, it would make sense in this regard, if it was that they were like, wait a minute, we're giving like my other rival company, the rival to my other company rather, is getting all this hits. Let's look into that. Let's fucking do a deep dive. Oh, wait a minute. At the beginning, they did a Skype group where like 5 people upvoted a fucking link. That's it. We've got them. That's the angle essentially. That was the setup basically.
I would say so. I upvoted my staff content. I saw you had published a thing, then I would fucking upvote it. But that's me doing that. I don't like. Is that cheating? I mean, is that cheating? But there was no systemized effort to cheat. In fact, like Reddit became like a thing we didn't really discuss at the office. Other than, you know, in the thing we discuss YouTube. Like, it's a publishing platform. Like, we would publish our videos on YouTube, we would publish our text articles and a link to a video. On Reddit, there was no difference between them. One of them drove tons of traffic to the website. One of them drove tons of traffic to the videos. But we handled it the same way, and we did no more cheating on YouTube than we did on Reddit. We actually think we played it very straight. And I would actually say that we hired several, freelancers and so on over the course of running the website, and most of all of them expressed pretty big surprise that we weren't like having some kind of systemized voting thing going on, because
supposedly everyone else did do it.
Exactly. Everywhere that they had worked, they had stuff like that, and they couldn't believe we didn't. So it's like, okay.
Yeah, I will clarify. When I said we were cheating, like, I was actually essentially getting caught in their fucking mental framework, which is that's what they would count as cheating. I often have to do this, by the way, whenever I talk about, like, Richard getting banned. Because I say he was banned for breaking the rules, and I go, the rules are nonsense, and they do arbitrarily assign them. So wait a minute, why am I even saying that he did it wrong? Like, essentially, if you don't agree with the law, it's immoral to follow it. Like, it's not the case. But let's spin this off then. So when we got to the point, because a key interesting part, I think, on this story is, as I've alluded to, I don't think Richard harbours very, like, amicable feelings towards your interaction with him. But this is what's bizarre, because I'm going to set it up in a way that's actually very interesting. There's a story I have never told you, actually, which is, you came to us, this is already when all the rest of us have been hired, Travis, me, Slasher, a whole bunch of other people, and we're doing all these really good work, we're doing great numbers, as you say, people on the other investigative side are getting like great stories, Travis is getting his interviews, I'm doing my articles, everything's going great across the board, and so for us, I will say, there was a feeling with us of like, listen, this is like the first time we've ever had like real salaries, not like, fucking a salary that sounds okay, but then when you actually find out the person works like fucking 80 hours a week, it's actually below minimum wage, Because I had like a real one. In fact, I'll give you a quick side tangent. When I got the OnGamers gig, the first thing I did was I Googled average salary, man, put in my own age, United Kingdom, journalism. And I actually was now making the literal average in the journalistic industry in the UK. And by the way, people wouldn't know that is like impossible. Like when I started in esports journalism, to make any money was what you were going to try and do. So the idea like somehow I'd caught up over like 10 years span or something, like 10, 13 years was already crazy. So there was a sense of like, basically just don't, it's like Moses used to say when we're all casters, listen, this job's great, let's all just not fuck it up. Which is a great mantra to have, by the way. Like, so he used to always go with that angle. So when you came to us one day, and one of your bold ideas, and I do mean at the time bold, was, why don't we hire Richard Lewis? Which at the time you have to understand, right? This is what a fan's not going to understand. They're going to think, again, obviously now. But back then, like, obviously he was a very good journalist. He was certainly one of the best in the industry. In fact, funnily enough, back then, he was probably the best at writing, actually. I think he was a brilliant writer, back when that used to be a thing. People weren't all to do with video like we are now. And basically, even back then, though, he also was a bit like me, where because you came from the days when like you were like shit on someone's shoe when you were interviewing them if they were a pro player and you were the journalist, you have to have a chip on your shoulder. You have to sort of be like, fuck you, like what I do matters. And in fact, it has to matter because I say so. And as a result, if someone attacks me, there's going to be a reprisal. I'm going to attack them. I'm going to fight back. I'm not just going to take it. So as a result, even back then, there would be, if I say drama, people are going to overblow it. There would be a lot of like arguments and disputes and you got into trouble with people. And the perception was basically, if you hire this guy, I mean, people already knew where it was going with Reddit, like maybe he's getting banned from Reddit or something. The perception was that he could fuck it up for everyone. And so it's that vibe of like, oh, let's not bring him on because what if he does something or says something, then we all get shit canned from it, right? And so I will say, when you had this idea, I actually already had made up with Rich and I was friends with him, like on an acquaintance level. I liked him and I always liked his work. But I even said this to him. I'm one of the only ones who did it in person, though, mate. I was once at an event where he was telling me about, like, oh, they all fucked me over. And you won't know this, but, like, Kim Rom, he said he was going to give me a great job. And they told me I'd got the job. And then he let me write that article. And then he didn't give me a job. And I said to him, look, Richard, you know how I am, mate. I'll tell you straight up. We had an internal vote and I voted no. And everyone else voted no as well. But here's the difference, mate. I'll tell you why. And I told him that reason. I said, look, I didn't know what you would do. I didn't know if you'd fuck things up, etc. I have to say, obviously, back then I had as many scandals myself. So I was in a position where I thought that, I wasn't going to do those things. But this is what I want to know is, give me your side of it. Like, because I actually look back now, and bearing in mind, first of all, I already knew the site was going to die anyway, and he is absolutely one of the best. Actually, he would have been a fucking sick addition. Like, he basically should have been on OnGamers, let's be real.
Should have been on OnGamers. So, what happened was that Richard had been in, like, all these fights. Like, Travis had this dumb thing about saying, like, the best journalist in esports every time he did
of course,
a complete creamy, no substance interview with a League of Legends player, right? And Richard Lewis I just started cracking up over that, and it started getting ugly because, like, Richard Lewis is a little bit like a bear. Like, if you poke him with a stick, he's at some point gonna get really annoyed, So And he had done one more thing. He had threatened to dox the admins of the League of Legends subreddit, I think, and
at least the word, I believe the wording was like he just said something, like I think he made a thing where technically it was hypothetical. It's like someone should, out who these guys are or something. And then they took that along with the fact that like he had actually researched who they are. They took that to mean like he said he's going to dox us, which listen, it's not a million miles from it, but I can see why they would choose that interpretation, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, my later conversations with him and his recounting of those conversations make me to believe that these people are not exaggerating, but that's just a personal bias based on personal experience. I thought that he would be fucking awesome, and I thought that he would fit right in. I also had I mentally had Slasher on a timeline. I didn't think that he would make it very far. By the way, I'll just
interject 1 second there. Listen, mate, already, if people don't know, Slasher already had basically... This is one of the problems, without going into a big tangent, I don't like the guy. I'll just say this for context, right? He's one of those people that is a classic, like, nerd fuck-up, where what they do is they'll work a million years for free, and the second you give them a fucking job, they'll just, like, slack off, fucking blow it, like, not do it. And you just think, like, dude, you fucking... Like, this is what you worked for. And so already he was just going months without doing a story. He was disappearing. Now, listen... It was fine. The rest of us could pick up the slack. But the issue with it was, in this scenario, like, I agree, it was the writing was on the wall. And bearing in mind, his whole shit was to get him massive investigative journalistic breaks. And that was Richard's whole shit. I won't even lie, by the way. At the time, I had my loyalties to Slasher because he helped me get me the gig and he was like a friend at the time. That's one of the reasons also I voted no. Because I even said to Travis and them, you are aware, if we hire Richard, like, that does mean that, like, when he keeps doing his job for the next 3 months, inevitably they're just going to cut Slasher. Like, they're going to have to get that money back somewhere. So I can see why you would think that, mate. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So I had contacted Richard Lewis about it at like a DreamHack winter event, and I tried to convince him to come on board. And at the time, he actually said no. Like, he was happy at Heaven Media. He had some loyalty. I think, if I remember correctly, I could be off on this one aspect of the story. But he had some reasons. I felt like they were based on loyalty towards people, not on.
I think it was the idea they gave him the gig or something. Yeah, like the editor-in-chief type gig. Yeah.
So I told him that what I could do, in terms of salary, and I tried to convince him with the fact that, hey, like, if you join this team of writers, like, I think your content is good. I think you can get much better, and I think we can help you get there. And I think that was a mistake. I think there is, in the same way that I fall somewhere on the autistic spectrum and you fall somewhere on it, I think Richard Lewis falls somewhere on the narcissistic spectrum. So when he hears any kind of even like vague critique of him himself, I don't think he's very good at processing it. So I think he actually became somewhat hesitant because I did that. But anyway, like, months go by, several months, and he contacts me and said, like, hey, he had been rethinking the offer and he would hear if it was still there. And he was incredibly polite and professional. So we started engaging in the conversation. I said that, well, so I have two issues. One is that I need to make you work with the team, and there's a lot of animosity from the team towards you. I literally couldn't come up with a single person on planet Earth that would be harder for me to get a yes vote from my team than you. And think about it. Think back in esports. Can you remember anyone that would have been harder to hire than this guy?
That was basically like the Voldemort name back then. Yeah, in that group. Yes.
So him and I don't remember who came up with the idea, but we came to the understanding that he would write an article about the collapse of ESTN, a broadcasting station in Berlin that had also started way too early and probably with way too much funding. And he had this awesome story about it. And I would edit it because one of the things that I wanted to remove from his work to make it, I thought, more digestible for a wider audience would that this chip on the shoulder that had to do with anything that had to do with financials. It wouldn't be enough for Richard at the time to mention the financials. It would also be followed by some kind of like stab or derogatory comments or comparing people to penguins that line up to get the free food, or like if you took money, and I think this took money at the time in Richard's life was like a weird concept. Weird as in like that you was also selling yourself out to a certain point by doing that, and that his articles at the time just tasted like that, and I hate it. Like, even if he's right and everything he's writing, then why put that aspect into the article when you can put other aspects into, or remove it and make it simpler to read? So he wrote this article about the Eastern collapse. I edited it and removed all the chip on the shoulder whiny stuff, and I think it was a much better article. I don't know what he thought because I honestly don't remember what his words were. And we published it, and it was a massive success. Like, one of our better articles. And he had published it under some stupid name.
I forget it now, but it was like, yeah, it was some like obviously like ridiculous because he was obviously trying to be like, it's a new person, but it's obviously not. And who could it be out of the 4 people in the world who could write this article? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't want the audience to know, but we knew that you guys.
Oh, I know. I know what it was. Wasn't it something like fucking Joe Interzone? Because it was like a reference to Burroughs, which is one of his favorite. I think it was something like that. You know? Yeah, exactly. Some like ludicrous alias. Yeah.
It could have been like hackers or something. You know, like it's just so dumb. But anyway, the article does really well, and then I bring it to the team, and I said like, "Hey guys, I really think we need to hire this person. Here's what we did. We had him do this article. He wants to, you know, change his content a little bit so it's more reflective of this and this, you know, blah blah. But I need you guys to agree to it. You guys have to work with him more than I do. I think we really need him for a business reason. I think we can take it far." Then we voted about it. I left the room so you guys could vote. Hunter, the product manager at CBS, came back and said like, the team voted no. I'm sorry. I'm like, okay. So I went back home and I thought about it. This is how I remember it, at least. I don't remember how long it was, if it was a day or a week, but I feel like relatively quickly I called a second meeting with you guys, and I begged you to reconsider. I said like, no, guys, like, I really think we need this. And I made a very strong case for why it should be, and I left. And you guys talked for a long time because, you know, Hunter wasn't in the office. He was doing the call with you guys. So I knew that he had a long discussion about it. But he ultimately came back and said yes. So I said no. The team votes no. And then I called up Richard Lewis and said like, hey, I'm super sorry. You know, we're at a point where we can't move forward with your employment. I really wish personally that we could. And trust me, I've done everything I could. And he said, okay, cool, I understand that. Disappointed, but I will go on, you know, as a journalist, and, you know, we hung up, and the day after, I started seeing like Reddit comments from people that he had been called up by some super drunk executive who had offered him a job and then took it back or something. I don't even remember what the story was, but it was so far removed from the reality that I had lived in that I was like, okay, this person deliberately misunderstands something to not accept the consequences of what happened. So that means that I you know, my relationship with this person is broken, and more importantly, I don't understand his brain. Like I'm okay with people doing all kinds of weird things, even when they're sort of asshole-ish. Totally be an asshole in this one way if the rest of your personality is fine. I am actually pretty good at like dealing with those things, but I have to understand the person's brain, and in this case, I just really didn't. We met a couple of times since and have had varying degrees of no success whatsoever with sort of like socializing. I tried reaching out to him a year or so ago and asked if it wasn't time that we sort of like buried the hatchet, and I just like got flamed back in my face. And I was like, oh, okay, oh, cool, it's dead. Like that won't happen. But I swear that I had the best intentions, as I do when I try to hire anyone that's difficult to hire for a team that was sometimes very challenging to operate and manage. And I think I gave him a really fair chance at it. Unfortunately, it wasn't his work that made the team vote no. It was his behavior as a person. I think he's very different today. That's my perception, at least. But back then, he was difficult.
I mean, listen, I would just tie it back to what I said before. Like, basically, it's actually something that Richard once told me, because basically, I'll give you a side story. There was an incident in Counter-Strike once where someone might have done something like, potentially they might have stolen some charity money, right? And some guy from that country started, like, investigating it. But like one of those fucking 80s movies where, you know, the cop's just obsessed. And they're like, listen, you got to let this go. I'm going to have to take your gun and your badge. But, you know, he's just obsessed. He must, like, get to the end of this. And then I was saying to Richard, like, yeah, but look at the fucking lengths this guy's going to. Like, he looks like he's nuts, mate. And he was like, oh, he probably is. But, like, who else is going to track this down? Like, how, you know, who the fuck else will take this story over the line? And I actually think back then, to be in our position, because again, it's not a glamorous industry. There's no trajectory at the time you're ever going to go anywhere. And basically, you're in a dead end. You're in a cul-de-sac. And the idea is you're doing it for your own motivational reasons. So that could be maybe you're doing it for your own validation. You got some fucked up angle. I get a great one, by the way, is you don't like some of the other people in the industry, so fuck them. This is how I'm going to beat them. I'm going to find out your secrets. I'm going to find out your secrets. And I'm going to publish them all. So, like, I even think that was almost built into our DNA. Like, I would say with a lot of the incidents I've had, a lot of the scandals, etc., part of it is that, like, as I say, like, I came up in a scenario where I was always the outsider. I was never fucking accepted. So the idea that then people are telling me, oh, you said things that are really unpopular. It's like, what's fucking new? Oh, what's new is now I have to say the things that are popular. Like, this doesn't even make sense. Was that the deal I was making? Was this the Faustian bargain to have money, you know?
I think the world has changed a lot. I think, as I said, I think Richard seems like it's slightly less aggressive and self-absorbed.
He's a lot happier as a person now.
He's also like, and the reason why I decided not to have more public confrontations with him back then was also because I was trying to analyze him. I said, like, I need to understand someone's brain, and I think a lot about these things in general. And for him, like, one of the things like came to the conclusion of is that if you have done investigative reporting of the caliber that he did, and I have all the respect in the world for most of his work, how can you not get fucking? Because it's just a world of weirdness and scummy people.
Oh, it's
doing,
very dark.
Like,
it's very dark.
Right,
yes.
right. Like, I think some of that might have seeped into him for a while. What do I know? I'm not a psychologist.
The question I have, though, because I'm sure even the viewers are wondering, is why do you ask the team in that scenario? Why don't you just hire the person? You know, why don't you make the executive decision and say, like, because as I say, technically, I actually think you were right. In hindsight, I look back now. First of all, you were totally right about Slasher. Like, I essentially was just defending him on personal ground at that point in time. And also, it's funny enough, that's why I can relate, by the way, to when you say the thing about Richard's right and had that thing of, like, if you took money, you know, you'd be compromised morally. Because I also used to view money in that way as well, because I'm like Richard, I'm from a very poor place, right, where you never ever have money. So, first of all, like, the idea that someone's going to wield money over you, that's the ultimate sin. Like, that's the one thing you never let them do, because then you have kind of sold out your roots. But more importantly, then, because money literally translates to you get to live and have food, I'm like you in that sense, mate. One of the reasons I hated from day one the idea of cancel culture is I don't want anyone to lose their job over a fucking tweet. Like, someone needs that job to eat and to feed their kid and put them in school and, have groceries and stuff. So, similarly, even though I knew Slasher was a fuck-up, because I knew some things about his personal life, I don't want that guy to lose his job. I mean, in fact, as people might have seen if they were in the industry then, he was in the fucking wilderness for a few years after, it wasn't yours, it was actually after ESPN, but, eventually he hit that point where he was just lost. And I'm sure it probably did impact his real life. So, that's what I was worried about. I was like, oh, fuck, we've got to do everything we can to sort of keep this guy afloat and don't let him sink, etc. So in this scenario, why not since you would on a business on a work level, you would have been right. It would have been a great addition to the team. It could have added a lot to our site. Could have shored up the investigative journalism side. Why not just make the executive decision and just say, I'm hiring him. Look, you'll know in a few months I was right. Why not do that? Why was it important we had to agree, basically?
I really believe that in the same way that I thought Richard Lewis would take everything that we did and then add 10% accumulative effect to it, because so he would bring more drama and so investigative reporting than anyone else would, right? So it would be like a nice cohesive package for the team in general. When you add the wrong person to a team, you can literally destroy the team in a week. Teams are a very fragile balance of personalities and egos, and I had hired the 6-7 people that were best at doing Reddit, which to a certain degree translates directly into also having the biggest personalities and the biggest egos.
Certainly,
you are by far the most difficult team I've ever had to manage. So, and I believe that that's sacred. When you have something that's
that works and is fragile, and you have all these talents that are like relatively on the same level and on sync with each other. Throw one dart into that and you can just fuck up the whole thing. And I thought the project deserved more than that. You guys have to work with him more than I did, so I needed you guys to agree with it, because if not, then it wasn't going to work anyway.
So as you said earlier, obviously, like the concept was ahead of its time. Like it basically almost couldn't have worked. And as you said, even going in, you thought it's like 25%. That's if we kind of max everything out. I do a great job. I hire the right people. So one question I have goes like this: is essentially, I understand why OnGamers failed, but why did no one ever successfully do that elsewhere? Because a fan's going to go, but they did Thorin, they did Yahoo Esports, they did ESPN, they didn't. What made those sites suck from day one is those sites could also never have succeeded, but for this very key reason. They had good esports writers, but they weren't even people who did numbers on Reddit sometimes. They were just people who were good in a qualitative sense, As you say, we had the people who were the best in the business and had these enormous personalities, which, by the way, has become the thing in journalism anyway. Look at Barstool, etc. Like that basically is the future of publishing. And also, we had amazing success quantitatively on Reddit. So I've noticed the other sites, they've also gotten in the VC money, but they also don't seem to hit their targets. They seem to actually struggle to do the raw numbers. So why has no one ever successfully done it on OnGamers? Basically, it still never happened.
Because Reddit as a platform, as a business entity, has a genetic hate towards creators. And I thought a lot about it. I'm a content creator now by profession, or trying to become one. And any kind of self-promotion or self-publishing on Reddit is seen as, like burning children alive before they hit the age of 6. It's the only content platform in the universe that I can come up with that doesn't do anything they can to make creators happy. They do all the opposite things. Like I have several smaller Reddits, subreddits, where I publish very niche content towards Commodore 64 fans or something, and I'll publish it in a C64 subreddit. And the video can be doing great, and then it was my first posting in that subreddit. And because I hadn't posted 3 other things first that had no relationship to myself, then it was seen as self-promotion. So they remove the most upvoted video that day that all the comments are positive on, because it didn't adhere to some rule, some restriction that tells artists and creators of content that to promote your own things, you have to publish somewhere between a ratio of 9:1 and 4:1 of other people's stuff, even if you don't care about it. It's not that they hate content creators so much, that I think they exploit them to become content data entry people for the content of the internet. That's how you become the front page of the internet, as they so profoundly declare themselves to be. It's because they're holding a generation of content creators hostage that has to do their dirty work for them, which is basically data mining and data entry of headlines and stuff on the internet that they then publish to all these subreddits. I remember the esports journalism back in the OnGamers days was that one of the scoops you could find as a journalist was to find a subreddit that no one had found yet with an easy to cover topics. You could just post garbage there. There was no research. There was no, I want to share this with the world because it's a better thing. No. I
used to literally post obscure drum and bass tracks to make my ratio. And I would always have 9:1 because I was posting some fucking vinyl thing from 1996 as well. No one ever voted it or clicked it, don't worry. But as you say that, by the way, if people don't know, I had to do that in order to publish the best article about a League of Legends jungler or something. Yeah. That was it.
It's insane. So they hate content creators. They've taken them hostage, and any attempt at using the platform to, I don't know, take something and put it in front of an audience so they can upvote it if it works, which sounds like the point of the whole fucking website, I just met with hostility and censorship. I'm a small content creator with 150 subscribers on my fucking YouTube, and I would say half of the videos I've published to Reddit, even when I read the rules and try to do, except for this filling a website with garbage just for the sake of doing it, I refuse to do that for anything in the universe. Half of them have been removed from Reddit. Half of them. I do a weekly video. Sorry, so one video every week, and obviously I put some work into them. So that's really weird to see that some Paul mall cop who thinks that he's important and is a uniformed Reddit officer on duty to protect his audience from things that they like. They are now the gatekeepers of how a significant portion of the internet accesses information and discussions. That's fucking scary.
Along these lines, because I always love to also talk about better cultural aspects, and obviously we've been in different areas of the scene, so we'll have different perspectives. What I wanted to ask you about was this. Along these lines, you can expand it beyond Reddit. The weird thing to me about the way internet works now is the entire internet from day one was built on the back of competent nerds. Let's be real, as you're saying, listen, mate, a lot of them were autistic. Hyper-competent autistic people basically built and maintained the internet. They basically do to this day. It's just that, the faces that you get shown in public, they'll never be that. It'll be the guy who's the perfect demographic, and the guy with the great fucking teeth, and the guy with the great, knows what to say, what the PR answer is. But the problem with that person is, and listen, I don't give a fuck. I think the most prescient book ever for this phenomenon is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. It's the premise that, you have all these people in an industry that essentially do nothing. They're just there for things like social reasons. They're there because, someone has to fucking sell something to someone. But you could never have the product without someone who probably has none of those skills, but just is incredibly focused, laser focused on one thing. And all that guy can live and die on incompetence. He has to be good in the tech. He has to make the next innovation. He has to make a breakthrough. He has to crack a problem someone can't even do that uses tech to even make the fucking marketing guy be able to do what he promised he was going to do a year before in some bullshit speech, right? It's like the Apple example again, you just go in and you go, right, invent something that's impossible in 6 months or the whole company's done. And then in terms that you actually have to do it in 3 months, but you do it because these people are they're magical. They're not normal humans if you've never met them. Now, what's bizarre though is there seems to be, those are exactly the people that it feels like all the other people in the business of the internet want to marginalize, if not get rid of. But the reason why I reference Atlas Shrugged is I don't think they're actually aware that you can do all the fucking things you want for political reasons, for optics, that dreaded word. Eventually, some guy has to make the machine work. And if you keep firing people, you keep margin, one day you'll look around the room and you'll go, I love 9, 10 people. Why is it not working though? Why have the numbers gone down? Why haven't we got the list? And you're gonna commit business suicide basically. So, what would your perspective on this be, having been inside the beast, as it were?
I think I think personality matters. I played as a DJ at a nightclub once every Saturday. And there were far better DJs in that city than me, far, far better. But I think I played with personality, and I was totally into it. And if you're an audience member in that club, I would give you some energy and make you dance more, even if my beat cuts were not as technically correct or on the on the note as someone with more skill could do. I think personality matters. I think this UB, the Gazelle internet company in Denmark that I was part of, we worked because we got all these personalities. I think about these people, when they decided we want to have a gaming website, there was not a single person in Denmark that had done that before. So they found a guy who had started a television show and who was still young. So, okay, he's built something, so we can do that. We hired back then in 1999, 2000, we hired all these people with personalities who didn't have a lot of experience in technology, because you couldn't have a lot of experience in technology. It just hadn't progressed far enough along a linear timeline for anyone to have experience. That was just the thing of it. And I think every company that I've ever been in that had a hiring process that was based on personality and not experience have done far, far better in the long run than someone who, needs a 3 years of experience, marketing experience to do a Discord server. Huh? What? I would even argue that when I think about it. A lot of the people I've hired for my esports projects, Xplayn, even still to a certain degree, were completely inexperienced. They had no idea what they were doing. Some of them had never written an article before. But I hired them for their personality, and there's not a single one of them that is not doing super well in their career today. you go through different stages of people in their lives as they run in parallel, and I will guarantee you that there are more people that I think have, to a certain degree, not fulfilled their potential in companies like CBS, because you sort of get indoctrinated to behave like a child, than there is to people who have been through a startup with awesome people who were there to enjoy the experience and to build something cool, whatever it would turn out to be. I think if you hire people with enough talent, then you don't have to baby them in as much as you do other people. They need to have some work experience. The only problem I have found with hiring people that are inexperienced is that if you have no work experience, you don't know how good you have it. That can be really hard to convince a millennial that he's working the best place he can do, or that he's working in the best place that he can be at doing the thing that he's doing, because that isn't really available anywhere else. Because he has no reference points, like he has no perspective on that. So I remember that from this UB Instant company. We had a couple of people who quit and would go somewhere else. Both of them came back. We only lost 3 people in 2 years. 2 people in 3 years, sorry. Both of them came back on the first day of employment somewhere else. And it was like, I looked around, I saw how people speak to each other, I saw how boring it was, and I'm willing to accept a lower salary to be with the group of people again that I like. No, that happens twice. Personality matters, man. Like, it all starts with personality. It's the uniqueness of us as individuals. That's, I think, personality.
That's actually the area where a lot of the, funnily enough, they have an overlap. It's just they're in esports. They're like the esports version of the shit. Games journalist, grifter, SJW guy. We have our own subclass breed now. And these people, by the way, whenever they talk about others, they do that classic thing where it's like, when you talk about others, you actually talk about yourself. You just don't know it, because how you phrase and your concepts actually betray how you see the world. So what they say is, they see me and they go, why do people keep giving him jobs? Why is he allowed to work in this industry? They say these terms that are just like, listen, motherfucker, no one gives me anything. I take what I want. No one allows me. You can't stop me. I see it completely different. But here's the thing, right? When they explain it in that particular way, one of the things they love to say is they have this angle that goes, right, well, what it is you were just there at the beginning, so somehow, you've got a legacy name, and that just keeps you going. Whereas actually, by the way, it's the opposite. You have to keep, if anything, you have to reprove yourself every year with you. But what I have noticed is, what they're not wrong about is, holy fuck, there are a lot of OGs who are still in super key positions in esports for reasons you're talking about. They just fit the space. They have a certain passion. They have a certain excellence, competence. They've cracked something about the space. And you can bring in other people who can be as good in certain areas, but not many of them actually match up in that regard. So obviously it's one of the reasons I've figured why I've managed to endure, and I can adapt myself, but I'll always keep some core essence the same. So my question for you is this. Maybe it's something related outside of work. I don't know. Why have you not tried to do some grand esports project recently? Why have we not seen the return of you in some other form? I heard maybe back in the day you were going to try and get involved E-League or something. So why has there not been another big thing? Because I always tell people, listen, the worst thing you could do is fire me. Look at the history of my career. When I get fired, I reinvent myself again. And by the way, I instantly shore up whatever the weaknesses that let me get fired. So if you hate me, just hope I stay doing what I'm doing now. It's the best chance. So why has there not been the grand return of Kim?
Well, I was working on it. That's 2 reasons. I got bitten by a fucking insect some years back, and it has significantly reduced my mental power levels. When I think clearly, I still think clearly, and I still see things that most people haven't seen yet, the invention of things. But I can't do it for the amount of hours that I used to be able to do it. I don't think I'll do a startup again. I did Xplayn.com again. I bought back the domain, and I launched a Metacritic for gaming hardware. So I have a database of every mouse, keyboard, mousepad, and headset in the world. I have user ratings for all of them across different parameters, and out of that I calculate an X score. And I was well on my way with sort of the marketing of it, and then COVID hit. And COVID was just at that point I had sacrificed 2 years of my life to make it work. Also a little because I believed it was maybe my last chance of doing something of this caliber in my new reality. And then COVID hits, like it's just so after 2 years of having invested the last bit of money I had left in the world, under the assumption that I had reduced my earnings potential by like 95% after getting bit, COVID hit, and it was just like fuck, I can't do this anymore. I've learned that I don't have when I run a team now of millennials, they don't care what I have done previously in life. They think my ideas about team management sounds foreign and weird to them in the same way you described. Like, I promise you that people who are 10, 15 years younger than you find them just bizarre sometimes. And I've realized that as soon as people find out that I have like impaired cognitive ability, you start to see the true person, the true character of people. Some people try to take advantage of it. Some people start lying. If they didn't do something, they will say, "Oh, Kim said this and this," because they assume that I won't be able to remember the thing that I said, and so on. So I don't think I want to run teams again, to be honest with you. I would love to be a part of something and be part of a team. I miss not running a team, but this feeling of a team working on something and accomplishing it. It's an amazing feeling. But I no longer have the personal drive and energy to be the guy who runs the team and forces everyone to do their best and get along. I have enough problems just forcing myself to do quality output.
Right, at the end of this interview, do you have like any final message you want to hit? Someone you want to thank or say hello to?
I'd like to apologize to all the people that I have offended greatly over the years by being drunk and doing absolutely stupid things in front of them. I don't remember who you are or what I did, but I'm really, really sorry. I think you should open the interview with that as a teaser.
Just to make it hype. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I want to tell you a thing. So I did the interview. Remember, we had this interview where this was sort of my test run. Like, I knew that I would hold myself to a high working standard if I had to do some kind of content piece that involved you, because I believe that you are a person who do the same thing, and you don't want to be judged by someone and then not at least having done your work, right? So that was a really good motivator for me. The next piece I started working on was for Gooseman. And it exploded in my hands to the point where, like, as I was working on this, this piece of music, movies, weird thing. And it ended up getting me a couple of sponsors who wanted to work on it with me. So we actually made a line of Gooseman clothing and like weird, like special sneakers.
Okay. Yeah.
And I thought I had really found my niche where I would do like these types of sort of like who is profile celebrations of people with personality that do something for esports now or have done so in the past. But again, we manufactured all this merchandise, was getting ready to roll out, and with a movie announcement and everything. And I was sitting in Poland, in Katowice, and then they canceled the event, and I just never recovered from that, basically. So no announcement, no audience to buy the merchandise, nothing. So it's sold on the ESL shop now, but like, so if I should give you a better answer, this like last two projects that I worked on kind of fizzled out, and I just don't want to do it again.
Okay, tusen takk.
You're welcome.
This video was kindly supported by Eddie, Chris with a K, Lager15, Pronogo, Shenlong, Zachary Carter, Adam Ox, Alexander Rao, Andreas Crockneys, Animosity, Dean Tanglis, Eric Hillestad, Hades, J Dubs, Jensen Gore, Joseph Ginsberg, Kovacevic, Tobias Bernasconi, Zumba, Zyrathenia, and as always, special thanks going out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Want to suggest topics or guests for my shows? Want to ask me questions in my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the upcoming guests? Maybe you want to be part of one of those discussions I do where we nerd out. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today by using the Patreon link in the description box below.